What is up, everybody? It's Just Wayne, and welcome to the Just Wayne Show. And I want to talk to you today about the new season of Love is Blind, which is set in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, which is where I'm from, which I just sounded like 50 Tyson. I'm repping Northside Zone, Twin Cities, Minnesota. What's so interesting after watching the first 6 episodes of this show is how much art imitates life. As a black person who is here from the Twin Cities, yes, there are black people in Minnesota. Noticing that the cast was overwhelmingly white, that black folks were set up more so as props, and it felt like there was a complete and total lack of diversity, which has actually fundamentally diminished the watching experience. And so I want to talk about what happened, what is going on in this season, how it connects to my own experience here, and then talk about what ultimately should Love is Blind do with future casts to ensure that we're not all sitting here collectively bored like we are now. So without further ado, welcome to the Just Wayne Show, and thanks for coming to my Wayne Talk.
There is nothing that I wouldn't do.
For your attention, please. Can I have your attention, please? Everybody just look at me. Everybody just look at me.
When the new season of Love is Blind was announced that it was going to be in the Twin Cities, I actually wasn't surprised because I had someone reach out to me to send in an audition to be a part of this season. There are a whole host of reasons why that was never going to be an option for me. But I did know that this was happening, that this was coming to Minnesota. And when that happened, collectively, many of us here were like, all right, we're all going to know someone on this show because everybody knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, especially here in Minneapolis and St. Paul, which is a big city with many vibes. It's Minneapolis, the mini Apple. And so I was fully prepared to know people on the show. So when they released the cast, I was like, I don't know if I know anybody. Now, what we have discovered since then is that we really do know somebody who knows somebody knows somebody. Everybody's kind of like 4 degrees of separation away from this cast. There are multiple people. I think there are 4 people on this cast that I have one person between me and them, which is wild. And I think that's just one of the elements of Minnesota. And so we went into this season kind of aware that there is a lot of connectivity. One of the things that was super fun for me to watch in the pods was for them to ask, where are you from? Because in Minnesota, that is a very important question. I'm not assuming it's not an important question in other states. I just know here, where you are from, where you went to high school matters. And I found myself sleuthing a little bit because I was listening to people and going, oh, yeah, they give me Anoka County vibes. I wonder if they went to Coon Rapids or Andover or Anoka. Really, Coon Rapids or Anoka, not Andover. Andover's a different animal and the same beast. When the one guy, Alex, I think it was, he was like, I'm from Edina. And I was like, yeah, we all have opinions about Edina. Which I think the entire world knows the opinions that we have about Edina because of the Mighty Ducks. And then you had a couple folks saying, oh yeah, I went to Catholic school. And I was like, where? As a Catholic school kid, I was trying to figure out what high schools they went to and found out because I did some digging that I do have 1 degree of separation between a couple of these folks who went to Catholic schools. And so we were aware that there wasn't going to be a lot of separation because there are 3.6 million people in the Twin Cities. But that's not to say that in those 3.6 million people that we're not all crossing paths. We all kind of assume that if you've been on the dating apps, you probably swiped on these folks. I figured there was going to be some controversy, which there already has been, of people getting online and saying, I have a story about this particular creator, which that is neither here nor there. I'm not here to cover that story. That ain't got nothing to do with me. But what I do think is important is recognizing that we knew that would be the case, and yet, the way that the cast rollout happened, seeing who was on the poster, I sent it to my group chat, and we were immediately trying to figure out, A, did we know the black folks? And B, trying to figure out why there weren't more black people on this cast. In part because, contrary to popular belief, there are black people in Minnesota. Now, there's one negative connotation that I can point out to that says, obviously black people are here. Some of the most major, nation-rocking police incidents involving black men have happened here in Minnesota. Whether it was Philando Castile, that happened in 2016, right? He was killed in 2016 in Little Canada, Minnesota. Whether it was George Floyd, which George Floyd is brought up during one of the episodes where one of the cast members, Sarah, was talking about how much the murder of George Floyd was an impactful moment for her, right? And so there are so many other incidents in the midst of those, but Minnesota has been on the map several times for that. There's also the reality that Minnesota has had classically some atrocious outcomes for black students. The discrepancy in income for black folks and discrepancies in housing for black folks. In part, why these statistics matter is because black people make up 10% of the population of the Twin Cities. So of the 3.6 million people, 10% of us are black, 72% are white. And the assumption is that, it's just white folks out here. And I do kind of understand that. I understand in a place that's this cold, it would make sense that maybe black folks wouldn't want to be here. But then I always remind folks when they say that Chicago is also cold, that Detroit is also cold, that Milwaukee is also cold. And the three cities I just mentioned are more well known for their black populations than Minneapolis is. And the reality is Minneapolis has a very prominent black community. And so when you recognize that there are a lot of black folks here, but also a lot of white folks, I kind of expected to see more of that. One thing I will say is I think these Netflix shows handle interracial dating in some weird ways. Now, I would argue that Minnesota is one of the interracial dating capitals of the world, to the point that me and some of my friends have this joke that I now realize I'm a part of. But we have this joke. We'll be at the Mall of America, and we'll see, a couple, and I'll be like, black dude, and they'll be like, chilling with his white girl. Like, there's so many interracial couples. I've traveled the country. I've been around the world. I've kissed a lot of girls, so I'm guessing that it's true, right? I've been to a lot of places, and I've never seen anywhere with the consistency of interracial couples as Minnesota. So I actually kind of went into the season of Love is Blind expecting to see maybe some of that happen because, contrary to popular belief, I think it's very easy to find out if the person across the wall from you in the pods is a black person. I think it's a very, very easy thing to figure out. There's just certain cultural cues and certain things that we say and that we do. And on the flip side, I think there's certain cultural cues and things that are said and done by white folks that kind of give it away. Dead giveaway. But across the history of this show, Love is Blind, and across some of the other shows like The Ultimatum, the way that interracial dating has been handled is almost with kid gloves, because even in 2025, there's this sense that America doesn't want to see that. And so I remember there was, multiple seasons of The Ultimatum where we saw some interracial coupling in the trial marriages. And I always felt like they were trying their best to tell us this can't possibly work. One of the most successful couples on Love is Blind ever, probably my favorite couple from Love is Blind, is an interracial couple. But even then, it's a white guy with a black woman. And so sometimes that's viewed differently, right? If you look at Ketanji Brown Jackson, if you look at Kamala Harris, there's a different way that that's viewed. But going into the season, I thought, given what Minnesota is, my experience and being outside in this metro area, I was like, there should be more of us. Like, more of us should have been a part of this conversation. I also think it's important to recognize that there was a season, I think it was 2 seasons ago, in the Pacific Northwest that was Portland and Seattle. Now, my girlfriend lives in Oregon, and one of the things that we joke about is that Portland is Diet Minneapolis, or as I like to call it, Portland is Minneapolis without black people, or Minneapolis is Portland with black people. And so the vibes of the 2 cities are very similar. But it was incredible to me the prevalence of black cast members on the season of Love is Blind that was in an area that has less of a black population than the Twin Cities. I believe Portland's black population is 3%. And so we have 3 times as many black folks per capita in the Twin Cities as they do in Portland. And yet we were systematically left out of the entire experience. So when you take that into consideration, you also have to take into consideration that Minnesota is a very basic place. And that was on full display in these episodes. I saw people online reviewing the episodes, and I felt this way myself, that it was really difficult to tell people apart. I was talking to my sister about it, and I was like, we went to college with these guys. And I kind of laid out, we went to college with them. They said in this dorm, then this dorm. She was like, yep. And I was like, and then they went to this off-campus housing. She's like, yep. They were part of this fraternity. Like, I know Ben and Daniel and Alex. Like, those guys are so familiar to me because I went to high school and college with them. Not them specifically, but the same type of person. And the reality is, Mason, Daniel, Ben, Alex, Dave, all five of those guys are different versions of the same person. It's not like in past seasons, we've seen vastly different personalities show up. The conversations that Netflix insisted on dragging on. Like, I was sitting there like, you're really gonna make us sit through this entire conversation right now when y'all are talking about, okay, well, I'm just really into my faith. Like, yeah, all of you are Catholic. Welcome to Minnesota. You're either Catholic or Lutheran. Welcome to Minnesota. Duh, right? But just the consistency of how those guys showed up. Two of them played Division I baseball. Like there was such a consistency, not only in their look, but in their aesthetic. Not only in their aesthetic, but their personality. And because there was a consistency in their look, their aesthetic, and their personality, it made it difficult for us to differentiate who was talking to who and when. I found myself, like, I kept going, wait, which one is that? Okay, what's his name again? Like, the forgettability of some of these characters is hard because it's like the whole point is I want to be rooting for certain couples. I want to see certain people stand out. And I really didn't get that sense because I kept trying to figure out if this was Dave or if this was Daniel or if this was Ben. I'm legit right now trying to look up the names of one of the characters so I can try to tell y'all the story. And spoiler if you haven't gotten to the end of the 6th episode, but one of the characters gets engaged and then she says, oh my gosh, I can tell that I've seen this guy before and he followed me on Instagram and I just put some really personal things in my Instagram. Don't mind me, I'm still scrolling. I put some really personal things in my Instagram about how important my faith is and how important my family is. Taylor. So Taylor was like, I put that I love Taco Bell and that faith is important to me and my family is important to me. And I thought to myself, shorty, your Instagram bio is basic. Respectfully, to sit here and be like, this man looked at my Instagram profile. He knew who I was the entire time because I talked about Taco Bell, faith, and family. Girl, I don't know, respectfully, a Minnesotan white girl who doesn't like Taco Bell and whose family isn't important to them. Like, that's not unique to you. And there's no way he could have gone into the pods and be like, Taco Bell, faith, family. That's that one girl from that Instagram that one time. But there's a collective basicness that translates into a blandness that we're collectively experiencing. We're collectively experiencing how basic they are, and it's making it difficult for us to know who we're watching at any given time. So my sister and I were talking about it, and I was like, it's like the guys are like different versions of mayonnaise. So you got like mayonnaise, and then you have mayonnaise light, and then you have like mayonnaise olive oil, and then one of them might be like sriracha mayonnaise, right? But like, they're just different flavors of the same dude, which I can't imagine being in the pods and trying to differentiate between the different women. Now, the different men. Now, at least the women had a little bit of difference to them, some of them. And the ones who had the biggest difference were Mads and Meg, which is funny because Mason was trying to pick between two women who were the most outlandish from everybody else. But for the most part, there was a consistency of basicness that existed in this that made it really difficult. And so it's not just that they weren't racially diverse. It was that they were not diverse in personality, not diverse in aesthetic, not diverse in experience. And that lack of complete diversity made it really difficult to just watch. I can't root for anybody if I don't know who I'm looking at from point to point. And so I have to start going, okay, Daniel, short king. Okay, Dave, the guy who at the beginning was like, I have an OnlyFans and what's wrong with you? Okay, Ben, like, I don't know. Okay, Alex, Edina. Like, I had to like get to that point as opposed to in past seasons where I could just be like, I know that guy. There's a story about him. And what was crazy is the couple black people we do get, the one black couple we get, both of them went to Park Center. And so I was like, which once again, I was like, what year did she graduate from Park Center? Oh, okay. I have a cousin that graduated with you. What year did you graduate from Park Center? Okay, I have a cousin that graduated with you. That's crazy. So I actually know somebody that knows both y'all. 1 degree of separation. So we get this blandness that shows up in the conversation. And so we combine that with the fact that Love is Blind was committed to just dragging out these conversations that had no substance, that had no depth, that went nowhere by a bunch of people who were the exact same. And it made it an excruciating watching experience, which is really frustrating for me for several reasons. One of which being, I love the messiness of this show. And even when the show tried to be messy, it didn't land its messiness well. Now, I will take a step back and say, and this was pointed out to me, there's a Minnesota niceness of this. There's a sense that like Minnesotans are very like, oh, I don't want to make the decision. Oh yeah, no, for sure. Oh yeah, no, you betcha. And so there's a sense of like, I don't want to ruffle any feathers that played itself out in the mess that maybe in a different city, it would have been more volatile. I mean, the fact that all the guys decided to not talk about who they were talking to was hilarious. And the fact that the girls decided to, I mean, Meg was coming back into the pause every time, like, I'm getting married, right? But it made it difficult to just differentiate and point out who. And there's a part of me that's afraid about this being an influence on media moving forward. Is that what we're seeing on this season of Love is Blind, the lack of racial diversity, the lack of personality diversity, the lack of aesthetic diversity, that is the trend that we're going to see in media, because the idea of representation has been co-opted as DEI. We've gotten to the point that the existence of black people on a show is DEI and wokeness that has to be rooted out. Now, there were a couple random black folks that were just in the pods there to hug folks when they came back from their dates. I referred to them on multiple occasions as like, who are these random magical Negroes? And if you don't know, the magical Negro trope is a person in a movie, the black person in a movie, who guides a white person on their journey towards being the hero of the movie. And they have some magical superpower. And the magical superpower that these black women and black men seem to possess in those pods is the ability to hug people when they are feeling down because their connections have some instability. While we get absolutely nothing about these magical Negroes having any sense of a real connection with anybody else in the pods. And so this existence of magical Negroes just existing in the background and white main characters who don't give us anything is the type of representation that people have been yelling about for years. When there's a black person in a Star Wars film, when a black woman plays a Little Mermaid, like, actually, technically speaking, that's not anatomically correct. A mermaid can never be black. Bro, they're mythical characters. But this is what that community has been clamoring for, is the elimination of black representation. That we don't want to see them, but when we push out the multiplicity of representation, not just black representation, we find ourselves with a blandness that is not palatable. And that's not just Wayne, the black woke guy, saying that. I'm watching white folks get on the internet and say, who are these people and why were they cast? Like, what? There are 4 different pieces of white bread that these women are asked to choose from. I'm not saying that. White folks are getting on the internet and saying that. And when we find ourselves in this spot, we're not taking the totality of what's possible into consideration. Now you could be like, Wayne, you should have volunteered to be on the show. First of all, no. I joke with my sister. I was like, first of all, happy, loving relationship, all of that. And also, I know how Netflix works. And if I was that one black dude, if I was respect to Devin, if I was the one black dude, because Devin and that was easy. If I was over here causing drama, because I would have been, because I'm amazing, right? I either would have been everyone's favorite or a villain, and I do not know how Netflix would have wanted to paint me. And also, I just don't, it's reality TV. I'm not participating in that. I'm way over explaining why I'm not, I'm way over explaining why I didn't do it. But ultimately, the choices that were made in casting go beyond just there weren't enough black people. It actually made the watching experience difficult. I don't think this was a great representation of Minnesota at all. I get it. You got multiple people from multiple parts of the Twin Cities. But man, there's so much richness in culture across the city. Just in Minneapolis. Uptown has an aesthetic. Northeast has an aesthetic. North Loop has an aesthetic. Edina has an aesthetic. St. Louis Park has an aesthetic. Minnetonka has an aesthetic. Going to the northern suburbs, Blaine, Andover, Coon Rapids, Anoka, 4 totally different aesthetics, totally different groups of people. And it felt like what they picked was, and this is the other weird thing, everybody was around my age. Everybody was upper 20s, like mid to lower 30s. I'm mid 30s. And so there was such an opportunity here, and it was just fumbled. So I'm really hopeful I'm going to watch, I'm going to finish it. And I really hope that it heats up. Now, Minnesota is notorious for being cold. As a matter of fact, we are under like a winter cold advisory as I'm recording this. It's supposed to be like -16 actual temperature overnight. That's not including wind chill. I ain't even look at what the wind chill is. I ain't going outside. But I really hope that this season heats up. Because right now, my takeaway, if I didn't live here, is that place is very one note. They got one type of white person, and that's the entirety of the Twin Cities. And there's so much richness. Like, I've long said, Minneapolis has the prettiest skyline of any city in America. Respect to Chicago. The skyline of Chicago from the lake is gorgeous. But like, yeah, I got to start over. Minneapolis is top tier, right? I've long said that Minneapolis is one of the best cities in the country to be in the summer. Like, I love my city. And as much as I love my city, I feel like my city is not being well represented by the people who are on there. And they better hit this thing up, because right now it just feels ice cold. And like it's undermining the collective of who we are and making it unwatchable. But experiencing this season over season, as a person who's black and lives here, as a person who wants to see representation, as a person who actually wants to see a diversity of ideas, a diversity of people, a diversity of personalities, love is blind, but not black. Thanks for coming to my Wayne Talk. This episode of The Just Wayne Show was written by me, Just Wayne. The music for the show is Attention, also by me, Just Wayne, for my album, Algorithm and Blues, which you can find anywhere you stream music. If you like this episode, please take a second and share it with as many people as you can. Like, comment. I appreciate your engagement. Because of you all, I'm finally able to enter into the YouTube Partner Program. You guys have been so amazing in subscribing and commenting and sharing this with people, so thank you so much. And I will see you again on Thursday talking about whatever's happening in the world. But until then, thanks for coming to my Wayne Talk.